We've got a great show for you today. We've got Rob Waid on. You're going to love it. But before we get there, I wanted to tell you about the Enliven Beverage Deal Audit. And if you have a beverage agreement, a beverage partnership with Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, you're going to want to listen because this could save you tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've been negotiating and managing beverage deals for over 15 years now. And one of the things we find when we're managing the beverage partnerships is oftentimes rebates get underpaid or miscalculated. Invoice prices at the local level are actually over contracted price. The volume reports are missing certain packages or certain locations. And wires get crossed and things are just missed. And however you cut it, that translates into lost money for you. And that's where the Enliven Beverage Deal Audit comes in. In just 15 minutes, you can provide us with all of the information we need to find you underpayments or overcharges. We know where to look. We know which geographies are most likely to have errors. We know which beverage company systems most frequently have errors. We have an audit analyst on our team. We've got a proven process. And the best part is there is no upfront cost or investment to take part. You only pay us a small percentage of any money that we actually find and recover. It's a no-brainer. Just this week, our team recovered $18,000 for one beverage company client. I'd be genuinely surprised if there were no errors for your business. How do you get started? Go to www.beveragedealaudit.com. That's beveragedealaudit.com. No risk. It only takes 15 minutes. Do yourself a favor. Go there today and sign up. All right, here's our podcast. Welcome to the Enliven Beverage Deal Podcast, where we're all about saving and making you money by taking both the guesswork and the legwork out of your beverage partnership and by leveling the playing field when it comes to negotiating your beverage contracts. I'm your host, Tim Harms. We've got a great show for you today. Stay tuned. Well, everyone, welcome back. So glad you're here. We got a great show, and we got a great guest this week. He is a friend, has become a friend of mine. His name is Rob Waid. He's the Foodservice practice leader at Enliven. Hi, Rob.
Hey, Tim. How are you?
Doing well.
Fantastic.
Here in quarantine world.
Yes, we are.
And this is your first time on the show, and I definitely wanted to give our audience just an idea of who you are and how you've come to Enliven. Actually, the first time that I remember meeting you was in a conference room in Kansas City, and we were about to release an RFP for a big healthcare client. And you walked in, and man, your face was all down to business. So Rob he joined our team last year, but he spent most of his career at Pepsi, and we negotiated against Rob, and Rob was a fierce negotiator, and now he has joined our team, and we're so glad. He brings so much energy and knowledge and just a ton of fun to our team, honestly. But Rob, I thought we could start off just by maybe if you could walk through your experience at a beverage company, at Pepsi, and walk through your career, introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure thing. And by the way, I remember that meeting. I remember all of my Enliven meetings, and believe it or not, I've actually kept track and kept score of my wins and losses with Enliven. And I'm 4-3. I won 4 beverage contracts with Enliven, and I lost 3. Lost the first 2. Then I had to test the waters again to see if I could get by with just a little bit more, and I lost the last one before I retired. So I have a winning record with Enliven. I'm always going to claim that. But yeah, so thanks. It's been a great to be a part of this team. But as you mentioned, most of my experience has been 30 years in the beverage world. and started out in very humble ways, sorting 16-ounce bottles on a production line in Cleveland, Ohio, and moved it's to several different markets, several different roles over 30 years, most of it in sales, some of it in operations. And it's been quite a whirlwind. And probably one of the most valuable things that I learned was just all the different markets I worked in, all the different cultures, all the different selling strategies, what was important to some clients, what wasn't. And every job I've ever had, as much as I could absorb, is what I learned. And they were all different. And it was just a phenomenal experience. In fact, I would like, before we get started, I want to, the irony of this week, I was going back and I was reflecting a little bit on my career, and the irony of this week, I have a Cola War story for you that taught me a lot of the elements of what I had learned in my career on one weekend, and I will never forget this weekend. It was the 4th of July weekend, and it was either in 1992 or 1993, so I was in my late 20s. I had just gotten promoted to territory sales manager, and we were in the middle of a retail activation strategy with Super Center Kmart. That's how, by the way, that's how far back it goes, because Kmart was a very relevant client back then. But it was, I had sold a general manager on allowing us to build this huge Pepsi billboard in the front of his store. And we were on sale that week, and he said, yeah, by all means, let's go ahead and do that. So as we started to kind of build the display, I noticed our competitor, Coca-Cola, was walking in the door, and literally within an hour later, Coca-Cola's semi starts pulling up, and they start building a display on the other side of the door, which I did not know was going to happen. So here we are. It's like the Thursday before the Saturday 4th of July. We had massive amounts of people out there, and we're building these huge 20,000 case displays with the billboard effect. You've probably seen those. One with Coca-Cola, one with Pepsi, spelling out Super Kmart. And by that evening, the general manager had come back out, and he said, he was talking to us, and he said, well, you guys, I don't know why you guys do all this crazy stuff, but he goes, the store looks great. And I remember that I had to do something different to put, for us to have kind of a competitive advantage.
Of course. And
we decided to build a soft drink stage, because I had a guy that was working on my team at the time, and he was a bass player in a band, and he said, hey, I'm supposed to go play at this bar tonight. And I was like, well, hey, you know what? If you stay, I'll book your band tomorrow to play on this soft drink stage tomorrow in front of the store, right? And here's what happened. The next day, the band shows up. We promoted it. We had a band playing on our soft drink display versus Coca-Cola. We had way more consumer engagement. The store manager loved it, and we sold way more product that weekend. So I got exposed.
Super K.
Yeah, it was great. I figured out how much it cost me to do all this stuff. I got some operational experience. I figured out what branding was. I figured out what promotional activity was. I had to pay for it, and lo and behold, in about 48 hours, I figured out what makes this beverage business tick. And it was just a phenomenal, very fun experience. But I learned a lot that weekend on how to get to consumers. So it was great.
That's a great visual, just in a nutshell, how competitive.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Coke and Pepsi are. Oh my goodness. So a stage. So I can just picture it. So you're literally, the band is literally performing on cases of Pepsi.
Yeah, we lay and literally on the size of the display it turned out to end up being like 30,000 cases of product, and then we laid pallets down. We put pallets on top of the product, and then we put plywood on top of that, and then the band showed up and they played for 3 hours, and we started serving free soft drinks out there, and the consumers that were coming up, they absolutely loved it. And I thought to myself, wow, hey, you know what? It wasn't Beyonce, But man, we were getting a value out of that music, and I thought, hey, is this how this really works?
You sowed the seeds for Beyonce right there. It was all your idea.
Yeah, there you go. I should take credit for that.
Well, no, that's great. I love it. And I love actually how that ties into today's topic, what we're going to dive into today, which is really the difference between a pouring rights agreement and a beverage marketing agreement. And so there are two terms. To be honest, I've been in this business for a while now, and I didn't even know the difference between these two when I first started. You hear pouring rights, kind of if you're not in the industry day in and day out, so a different term. Your beverage marketing agreement. So I thought we could bring you on, and you can just walk through the difference between the two concepts: a pouring rights agreement, and a marketing agreement, beverage marketing agreement. But really, it seems like what you just shared, the activation part of it, the marketing part of it, the experience part of it, is going to come into play here. So I'll just start there. Can you explain the basics of the two types of agreements, how they're similar and how they're different?
Sure thing. Great question. So in a nutshell, if you think about pouring right agreement and what it means to a beverage company, and by the way, everything with them is about activation. They want to activate every 24 hours, 7 days a week. So when you say the word activation too, I mean, could you even dive into that? Because I know that's a phrase that isn't even always known outside of the beverage industry. What do you mean by activation? Their brands, right? How do they portray their brands in front of consumers? And they want access to consumers. And so how do they market and brand their specific product lines in front of consumers? And in a pouring right agreement, you would define it more as internal, meaning how many consumers does a certain property provide a beverage company so that they can get their products in front of them. And some of the examples that we have in our business, whether it's a healthcare client or an airport or a restaurant, there's a certain number of consumers that will come in those front doors every single day, and that beverage company has an opportunity to market and brand their products directly to those consumers within the four walls of those locations. And it's more of like an internal activation. So pouring right agreements, I would even go as far to say pouring right partnerships, depending upon how aggressively a beverage company wants to market internally, is how I would kind of paint that picture. A pouring right agreement would lean more in on that side. Marketing is more about branding externally. How can a beverage company take that same property and we'll use an example of the Chicago Cubs as an example. They're going to take that brand, right, and they're going to try to externally activate that property to other retail chains, retail outlets. And if they can monetize it, you're starting to get into some of the marketing, advertising, investment strategies, and that's where that external activation comes into play. So if you're thinking about pouring right, it's about how do they get access to the internal part of that equation within the four walls of a property, and then external is what can they do outside of those four walls. And there's several examples of that. But really, I'll be honest with you, the best properties are the ones where you can leverage both. And that's for the most part, that's always our goal at Enliven, is how do we take advantage of both of those aspects. So you brought in the example of the Chicago Cubs. So pouring right would be inside the stadium. The drinks that are served are going to be Pepsi or Coke or Dr. Pepper, whatever beverage partner they choose to go with. But a beverage marketing agreement would be outside of the property. When you go into the supermarket, you see a display that puts the Coke brand or the Pepsi brand alongside Chicago Cubs. Correct. Yeah, where you start to link the value of those two assets. The beverage companies are really, really, really good at doing that. But it's a whole different philosophy on what that return on investment is, and that's why it gets a little tricky at times, right? To try to access both. But there's a value. There's two separate values there, but anytime you can try to link the two together, it's beneficial to our clients.
So how do the beverage companies think about this, about the two types of agreements? Is one more valuable than the other? Are they both valuable but just separate? Are they trained to go grab both? Give us some insight into how they view.
Yeah, so one example I would say where a pouring right agreement is valuable, if you think about restaurant clients, right? Restaurant customers, pouring right agreements are very important, would be the majority of the value, because so much of the revenue and profitability that a restaurant will generate comes from that pouring right agreement. So whether it's negotiated lower cost equipment platforms that the beverage companies provide, service that goes into it, there's so much revenue that is provided to that restaurant client. That pouring right agreement is critical, for them to be a profitable entity and to be a profitable brand themselves. You always want to try to figure out a way to introduce what, kind of the branding strategies that a beverage company can provide, and so that even an external marketing strategy would play a part in that. But from a restaurant perspective, you would want to make sure that pouring right agreement is really solid. And then I would say on the opposite end of that, most of your large marketing agreements don't even pour beverages. An example would be Coca-Cola has a partnership with the Olympics, and what a big, great event that is. But they don't really buy anything, right? They're leveraging the Olympic brand to activate in the retail marketplace to drive revenue. But the Olympic Committee, the Olympic Games, they don't really purchase anything. The same could be said for Pepsi's example to that would be their partnership with the NFL. Right. Technically, the NFL doesn't purchase a case. All of those contracts are negotiated with each of the teams separately in all of those stadiums. But there's a real brand value to the NFL and what they can do externally in the marketplace. So you can see where they're two different philosophies. But if you can kind of figure out a way to kind of blur the line, or a beverage company could take advantage of both, that's kind of a match made in heaven. And those are the kinds of proposals that we like to work on.
It's interesting because when I think about pouring rights, in some ways, the beverage company is purchasing volume. In essence, there's a return that they can measure. They can look at their finance people and say, "I'm spending this, and because of that, there is an estimated volume of X that's going to come back." In a marketing agreement, it seems to me that there's not a clear line between what the return is on that investment. But it also seems that when you're talking about the Olympics and you're talking about the NFL, I mean, there's huge dollars in those types of agreements.
Yes.
So can you speak to that dynamic a little bit? How do the beverage companies value marketing versus how they value actually just acquiring volume?
Because they build, if there's one thing that they're really, really, really good at, and I think most consumers, most customers don't view them this way. But they view themselves as they're brand developers. Mm-hmm. These are companies that have been around for over 130 years. They have been through pandemics. They have been through world wars. They have been through depressions. They've been bankrupt. They have faced more challenges in the world, and they build their business literally, 1 8-ounce serving at a time. And so consumers ultimately is what drives their business. But they have to get to a lot of consumers in order to be profitable. And so if you're in the consumer business, it's about mass quantity, right? And so investment strategies have to account for that. And that's why they're willing to partner with the NFL. That's why they're willing to partner with the Olympics or Beyonce that we had mentioned earlier. So there's a number of different strategies that they lean into to try to maintain that relevance. On top of, think of all the different brands. And most people don't associate Pepsi with, they literally have 22 $1 billion brands. Think of how hard it is to build one brand to $1 billion. But they've got 22 of them. I think Coke has 12. Nestle has like 29 $1 billion brands. It's difficult to do that, but you can't do that unless you're making significant investments into getting to consumers and building that awareness. And if you've been around for as long as they have, they've figured it out. But it's so critical to them that it's dollars well spent in their mind.
That's such a critical point in that Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, on one hand, yes, they are beverage companies. They distribute beverage products. But really what they do is create and innovate and market brands. I mean, especially in today's world, I mean, obviously all of them have the iconic flagship brands, whether it's Mountain Dew or whether it's Diet Coke or whether it's 7-Up. These great brands. But in today's world, where so much of the innovation is in juices and teas and organic sodas and all of these other innovative categories, I mean, brand development is even more critical now than it was. It's even more critical now is to claim the new ground, I guess.
Correct, because the consumers have changed, and again, this goes back to their expertise. As the business has evolved, right? They've had to keep up. And when I started in this business, literally it was like over 32 years ago now. We carried 70 different total SKUs in the warehouse. 70. When I retired, there was over 700.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, they don't, beverage companies don't do that because they're bored. Okay. Right. Because they had to keep up with the times and the changing consumer. And look at how big water has become. Look at how big sparkling water has come. You had mentioned it, natural products. They are building brands every single day. And so, and that's where the investments go. That's where the investment strategies go. But at the same time, they have to always be looking 2, 3, 4 years out. What's coming next, and that's how you survive as long as they have.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening in. Hope you found that informative. That was part 1 of a 2-part series we have exploring the difference between pouring rights and a marketing agreement and how you can merge the two together. Tune in next time as we're going to explore some of the common objections to this train of thinking, including what to do if your property doesn't rise to that prestigious level of the NFL, the Olympics, at least in your mind it doesn't. Or what to do if you're concerned that your facility is going to end up like a NASCAR vehicle with ads plastered all over it. We're also going to talk through how you get started down this path. You won't want to miss it. Tune in next time. And hey, before we sign off, I want to remind you that you can take both the guesswork and the legwork out of your beverage partnership. You can level the playing field in your beverage negotiations, and you can save or make your company millions through a new or an improved beverage agreement. The first step is a free beverage opportunity analysis, which will tell you just how much you can save or you can make. Sign up for your free beverage opportunity analysis at enlivenpartnership.com and by clicking free savings estimate. On behalf of everyone here at Enliven, thanks for listening in.